Did you hear about the Fed?
No, what about the Fed?
They announced another round of the quantitative easing.
What does that mean?
It means they are going to make large asset purchases via POMO.
What does that mean?
It means they are going to expand their balance sheet and buy treasuries.
What does that mean?
It means they are going to print a ton of money.
So why do they call it the quantitative easing? Why don't they just call it the printing money?
Because the printing money is the last refuge of failed economic empires and banana republics, and the Fed doesn't want to admit this is their only idea.
So why do they want to print the money?
Because they say we have the deflation, and the deflation is very bad.
What is the deflation?
The deflation is when prices of the things we buy go down.
Isn't that good? Doesn't it mean the people can buy more of the stuff?
Yes, but the Fed said this is bad, especially during the recession.
So they think that during the recession, when the people have less money to buy the stuff, it is bad that the prices go down?
Yes, the Fed would rather have the inflation.
So why does the Fed think we have the deflation?
Because the CPI said so.
But aren't the food prices higher than a year ago?
Yes.
Aren't the gas prices higher than a year ago?
Yes.
Aren't the healthcare costs higher than a year ago?
Yes.
Aren't tuition prices higher than a year ago?
Yes.
Aren't the taxes higher than a year ago?
Yes.
Aren't the subway fares higher than a year ago?
Yes.
Aren't the stock prices higher than a year ago?
Yes.
Aren't the bond prices higher than a year ago?
Yes.
So what is deflating right now?
The only thing deflating that I can see is the Fed's credibility.
Did they have a lot of credibility to start with?
No.
Why not?
Because the Fed has been wrong about every major economic development in the past 20 years.
You mean they didn't see the internet stock bubble?
No. In fact, they helped fuel the internet stock bubble.
And they didn't see the housing bubble?
No, in fact, they helped cause the housing bubble.
And they didn't see the subprime crisis?
No, in fact, they told us subprime problems were contained right before the shit hit the fan and the Lehman went bankrupt.
So has the Fed ever been right about anything?
Let me see if I can think of anything. Nope, nothing.
Who runs the Fed?
The Fed is run by the Ben Bernanke.
Does the Ben Bernanke have a lot of business experience?
No, the Ben Bernanke has no business experience.
Does the Ben Bernanke have a lot of policy experience?
No, the Ben Bernanke has no policy experience.
Has the Ben Bernanke ever run in an election?
No, the Ben Bernanke has never run in an election.
So what qualifies him to run the Fed?
I don't know, maybe the fact that he has a nice beard.
But my plumber also has a nice beard, and I would not trust him to play God with the economy.
No, although when you call the plumber to fix something that is broken, they usually fix it, not break it more.
This is true. The plumber is clearly smarter than the Ben Bernanke.
Well, that is why he became a plumber and not an economist.
How does the Fed execute the quantitative easing?
They print the money, and then they buy the Treasury bonds.
Do they buy the Treasury bonds from the Treasury Department?
No, they buy the Treasury bonds from the Goldman Sachs.
You must be shitting me.
No.
So let me get this straight. If I want to buy the Treasury bonds with my money, I can buy them directly from the Treasury.
Yes.
And if you want to buy the Treasury bonds with your money, you can buy them from the Treasury.
Right.
But if the Ben Bernanke wants to buy the Treasury bonds using the American people's money, he does not buy them from the Treasury, he buys them from the Goldman Sachs?
Exactly.
And does the Goldman Sachs give him a good price?
Of course not, they are the Goldman Sachs. They make their living ripping off the American people.
But how is the Goldman Sachs able to do this?
The Fed announces what it is going to buy, and when it is going to buy, before it does the trade.
So the Goldman Sachs can front-run the Fed and give them the worst possible price on the Treasury bonds?
Yes, exactly.
And the Fed is okay with this blatant theft from the American people?
Of course, otherwise, the Fed would just buy the Treasury bonds directly from the Treasury Department.
Who inside the Fed is responsible for the buying of the Treasury bonds?
The buying of the Treasury bonds is conducted by the New York branch of the Federal Reserve.
And who is in charge of the New York branch?
The head of the New York branch is the William Dudley.
And what did the William Dudley do before running the New York Fed?
Before running the New York Fed, the William Dudley was a partner at the Goldman Sachs.
So the guy in charge of the American people's money when dealing with the Goldman Sachs used to be a partner at the Goldman Sachs?
Yes.
And nobody has a problem with this?
Apparently not.
Is this an episode of The Twilight Zone?
I don't think so.
Are you sure?
Pretty sure.
So what you are telling me is that the Fed thinks prices are going down, when in fact they are going up?
Yep.
And they think during the recession, with the high unemployment, it is better if the things people need to buy cost more money.
Correct. According to the Ben Bernanke, the inflation will create the jobs and improve the housing market.
Has this ever been tried before?
Yes, just last year the Fed tried the quantitative easing with $2 trillion.
Did that create the jobs?
No,
Did it help the housing market?
not at all.
Did it help anybody at all?
Yes, it helped the Goldman Sachs.
How much of the money are they printing now?
$600 billion.
So even though the first $2 trillion did not create the jobs or improve the housing market, the Fed decided to do another $600 billion anyway?
Yes.
Who put the Ben Bernanke in charge?
The Ben Bernanke was first appointed by the President Bush, then he was reappointed by the President Obama.
But wasn't the President Obama supposed to bring the change?
Yes.
How is putting in charge the same fool, who has been wrong about everything, the change?
Well, under the President Bush, the Ben Bernanke only blew up the American economy. Under the President Obama, he is working on blowing up the entire global economy.
That does not sound like the change we can believe in.
Definitely not.
Who else supports the Ben Bernanke?
Most economists around the world think the quantitative easing is very dangerous.
Does anyone think it is a good idea?
Yes, the people at the Goldman Sachs.
Is this some kind of nightmare?
No, it is very real.
I want to bang my head against the wall.
You should not do that.
Why not?
Because the healthcare is too expensive.
But didn't the President Obama fix that?
No. But that is the subject of a whole other video. Goodbye.
Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Monday, December 13th, 2010, and I am Darko. Welcome to this economic news bulletin. New viewers or listeners, please visit my website, www.ggnonline.com. That is ggnonline.com. You just checked out that video from Cryptagon. I'm not sure if they're the ones that actually created it, but appreciate that. Pretty informative, and it really does help explain the madness of it all, this whole economic system. And you know, that's what happens if you just take your time and you connect the dots. You'll see how ridiculous it all is. I mean, it's out there in plain view, but many people are confused by it just because of the lingo that they use, quantitative easing. Like I said before, it sounds like a laxative, but all it is printing up money. So without further ado, we're just going to jump into the headlines here and finish up, see if we can get this into one video. If not, we'll make it two. But this says dollar slumps with U.S. deficit fears again in the focus. U.S. deficit concerns return to the forefront of foreign exchange trading on Monday, pushing the dollar lower after Moody's said a tax cut deal reached last week by the White House and Republicans could shift its outlook on the United States' top credit rating. So here we go. Euro has 1 in 5 chance of survival. Pretty big news. And this is Warren's CEBR. And it says here the chances of the euro surviving its current form has been put at 1 in 5 by one of the UK's leading economics consultancies. So it said in a research paper published today, the Center for Economics and Business Research claims that keeping, quote, the euro alive will require cuts in living standards greater than the UK faced in the Second World War. End quote, for weaker Eurozone members. There is no modern history of falling living standards in peacetime on the scale necessary to keep the euro in its current form. Wow, dude. And you hear these people talking about how we need a war in order to fix the economy. I mean, that's just kind of really scary. Oil up on China data amid caution about inflation. Oil prices rose on Monday, surging early with commodities lifted by strong Chinese economic data before oil met resistance above $89 a barrel amid investor concern that China may yet take more action to cool its inflation. And we'll cover that as well coming up here. Contango reverses as oil producers sell near $90 a barrel. Energy markets, oil producers increase sales for the first time in 4 weeks to lock in profits near $90 a barrel, reversing a 2-year Contango, raising speculation that stockpiles will decline. So it says here, producers and merchants increased the so-called net short positions in crude futures and options by 13% in the week ended December 7, setting prices for output from wells. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission said in its commitments of traders report it was the second largest set of sales in 2 years. So you can check out more. The links will be posted in the description below. Sorry. Gold may beat silver, lifting ratio by as much as 20%, technical analysis say. Gold may outperform silver, lifting the ratio between the two metals by as much as 20%, according to the technical analysis by Société Générale de Switzerland. China leaders emphasize fighting inflation. China will ratchet up efforts to quell inflation in 2011 while pushing forward economic restructuring. That sounds not good as well. We all know what economic restructuring is, right? Lower standard of living, printing of money to help sustain robust growth. And it says here, state media said on Sunday after the close of an annual policy setting conference. So we're going to move on here with China, and it says here China gives U.S. stocks a push. U.S. blue chip stocks close higher Monday as China, a motor of the global economy, which is by design, of course, right? I said they're the producers of the world now, producers of the globe, and we provide the army. And the Middle East, basically, and Africa provide the battleground for the never-ending wars and eugenics. But it says here, a motor of the global economy elected not to raise interest rates despite a pickup in inflation last month. So it said the Dow Jones Industrial Average finished up 18.24 points, or 0.16%, to 11,428 after rising by as much as 70 points during the session. So we're going to move on here. JP Morgan up next. JP Morgan China revenue up 80% to record. And it goes on, it says here, JP Morgan and Chase Company will see record revenues from China this year as the second largest U.S. bank benefits from a surge in equity rising by Chinese companies. The head of the bank's China investment banking business said on Monday at the Reuters China Investment Summit, Treasury prices get a lift after Fed buys bonds. And we just covered that, right? Treasuries reverse losses after the Federal Reserve buys $7.8 billion. A 10-year yield slips to 3.28%. U.S. Treasuries swung from losses to gains after the Federal Reserve stepped into the market to buy government bonds on Monday. Excuse me. Joseph Stiglitz, America's quantitative easing too poses considerable risk. I covered this in my last video, but I thought I'd include this because it's relevant with what I'm covering. And it says here, Nobel Prize winning economist Joseph Stiglitz has said that the U.S. government's second bout of quantitative easing poses, quote, considerable risk to global economics. Here, next year's Federal Reserve loses $2.4 billion in taxpayer money in most recent QE2 POMO interval. And this article was published, I believe, before the tax cut bill was signed. It says payroll. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a separate. Payroll tax cut worries Social Security advocates. Social Security taxes ought to be held sacrosanct, says lawmaker, whatever the heck that means. President Barack Obama's plan to cut payroll taxes for a year would provide big savings for many workers, but makes Social Security advocates nervous that it could jeopardize the retirement program's finances. So it said this plan is part of the package of tax cuts and extended unemployment benefits that Obama negotiated with Senate Republican leaders. It would cut workers' share of Social Security taxes by nearly 1/3 for 2011. Workers making $50,000 in wages would get a $1,000 tax cut. Those making $100,000 would get a $2,000 tax cut. So there you go. It goes on here. It says the government would borrow about $112 billion to make Social Security whole. And moving on here, tax cut bill survives Senate hurdle. Says an $858 billion bill to extend tax cuts for 2 years has secured 60 votes in the Senate. The threshold needed to schedule a final vote. And it goes on, it says while the tally is not final, it is in fact a green light for the Senate to finish debate on the package and send it to the House by midweek. So next up here is tax cut plan eases pressure on Bernanke and Fed. Tax cut plan in Congress eases pressure on Fed's bond purchase program to boost the economy. The Fed's last month absorbed a wave of criticism for announcing it will buy $600 billion in Treasury bonds to try to revitalize the economy. It won't help, critics said. So when the Fed officials met Tuesday, they were unlikely to feel a weight that has been lifted. So everything that they did was great and wonderful. And that's why we're just the greatest, freest country in the world, the most prosperous, right? Bill Clinton supports Obama's tax cuts, and this is going to be all the time I'm really going to have for this video, so please join me in part 2 of this economic news bulletin. This is Global Government News, and I'm Darko. Thank you.